Nikon is no stranger to the manufacturing of macro lenses in the 50mm range, having released many over decades for the f-mount. But with three other similar 50mm focal lengths in the Z-mount predating the Nikkor Z MC 50mm f2.8, it left me wondering why. Then, out of nowhere, it made sense. We will explore why I bought one in a future video, but today we're just going to be looking at it for the first time and seeing what's in the box and seeing how it feels, and also taking and reviewing our first images. Make sure to keep an ear out for today's photo history trivia. It'll be somewhere in the middle with the answer at the end, but for now, I'm Z Wade, welcome to the studio, and let's get into it. Chin up for me, please. A little bit to the left. Eyebrows up. Got it. This lens was released not that long ago, as of the making of this video, and it was released alongside a beautiful 105mm, and we've got a hat for the first time in a long time. Let's see if we can actually fit this on our head. Unfortunately, this useless lens pouch, which we like to use for Orthodox priest hats, does not work. I absolutely think these are totally worthless. If it doesn't seal, it's kind of worthless to me. Also in the box, we have this cute little lens cap, which I really don't see how this does anything because it's just so small. The walls are so small. I don't think that's going to be useful at all. We have a little booklet with our instructions in it, and it's kind of huge. But we don't need instructions. We know how to use lenses. I did indeed buy this lens without even testing it, which is usually not how I roll. But as I said, this lens made sense to me out of nowhere. And I should say that I do wish that this was the original idea that they had for this range. They had a 60mm on the roadmap, and I'm a huge fan of the 60mm macro that existed in f-mount, especially the D version. That was a phenomenal lens and a Swiss Army knife lens. Like, it literally did everything really well. But at some point, they did switch this up to where it would be exactly what I have in my hands right here, which is the 50mm MC f2.8. Let's go ahead and check the lens cap here. It's good, just like all the other Nikkor Z lenses. Let's take a look in here. It's all right. This is a nifty looking lens. It's definitely more nifty than its 60mm predecessor. We have an auto and manual button. Let's check that. It's nice and clicky. Let's check the full and limited switch. That is nice and clicky as well. Let's check out the focus. The Nikon Z system is electronic focusing, and this does extend when you focus it, and maybe that's why it doesn't feel particularly good on the focus ring right now. Maybe whenever we get it hooked up, it'll actually feel better, but this doesn't feel good. We'll have to tackle that later. It feels pretty good for a 50mm macro, I would say. It is made almost entirely of plastic, although the lens mount is metal, which is fantastic. We appreciate that. It, of course, is made of hard plastic, but, I mean, for what it's worth, it feels like it's built okay. I should say it doesn't feel any better or worse made than any other Nikkor Z lens. This lens actually is not made in Japan nor Thailand. This is one of their Chinese ones. The Nikkor Z MC 105 2.8S is actually made in Thailand. In the comments below, let me know if you've ever used this lens before or if you're thinking about getting it. Jumping in real quick for today's photo history trivia, what was Nikon's first camera lens? The answer will be at the end. Now let's get back into the review. Now I think it's time to throw this on the Z6 II and go take a couple of test shots. So here we are in light. Wow, that saturation is fantastic. I want to start off by saying that the only issue I had was on this image here. I had been messing with continuous autofocus to do these because we had a little bit of wind, and it got really confused at this point. It did get it. I had to kind of throw the focus away and then come back, and it got it, and it's really sharp, but that's not good, but it's the only time it happened, so I'm not too worried. So let's get into it. As I said, the saturation is fantastic on this, and the greens just look great. And I would call this a moderately quick autofocus. Although, as a macro lens, you'll be using the manual focus a lot more than autofocus, But I will say that while the focus ring does feel stiff, it is nice and responsive, and I actually kind of like it better than the 105. Let's check out this next one. Again, the saturation is really good. There is some vignetting on this lens, as we can see. I usually add some anyway, so it's not that big of a deal, but it could be a big deal to you. Yeah, I really like the colors of this lens. It's really, really good. This lens focuses extremely, extremely close. I mean, you can get right in on it. This is at 50 millimeters too. It's insanely, insanely close focus. Almost surprising. As I was out there shooting this, I was like, damn, how close am I? Like, when's the focus gonna be too thin and just not focus at all? And, you know, it's not insanely sharp. Of course, we're shooting at higher ISOs today because it's early morning, but it shouldn't be insanely sharp as the 105. The 105 is rather insanely sharp. There are a few lenses that rival its sharpness. Again, we're very, very close. You know, I hate greens, but the greens are really good on this. Very, very shallow depth of field. Now, these are not my favorite, but here coming up pretty quick, there is some really cool shots. We're going to move our focus point down a little bit in this next image to get some of this in here. Let's just hit previous on that. That looks really good. It's very sharp. This one here, foobar a little bit. There's a little bit of motion in there. Or perhaps it just kind of missed focus. But this one I like a whole lot. This looks super, super good. Again, not as insanely sharp as the 105, not as clean, but it is very, very nice. We are going to use this real quick, actually, to check how it looks in black and white. Rather neutral in this particular image. We might try this again on another image. That's pretty silvery. That's okay. Okay, let's check out some texture work here. Okay, so the tonal range of this lens is pretty good. These aren't ideal subjects for a tonal range test. No, this one might be. There's a good silver quality to this lens. This actually might be a good lens for my silver set collection that I've been working on forever. This is pretty cool. I got a some spiderweb going on here. This isn't the best one I got of this. This one here is much better. Let's check it out. Let's give it a little play around here. Not a good black and white image. Looks like it's focused right through kind of here. Now we're going to get into flowers, which is what you would expect to shoot with a lens like this. I expect a little bit of motion blur here. I was trying to hold the flowers as best I could, but there was some wind. That looks okay. I wouldn't call this a superb macro lens. Of course, I'm comparing this to the incredibly undervalued 105 for the Z mount. But this lens is incredibly versatile, being a 50 millimeter, and I think that's a good selling point of this lens. Although, judging by what I've seen so far, I'm not quite sure it's worth as much as it is, even with the $50 that I saved. I want to try jacking up the clarity and then pulling the texture. Not an ideal candidate. This image isn't an ideal candidate for that kind of style. Let's try this one. Ooh, too bright. I think this one looks much better in a softer kind of texture. Yeah, when you pull that texture back, it gives it a bit of a creaminess. That's cool. So yeah, this one here is very, very, very sharp, it seems. But on my screen, it's still got that kind of same level of sharpness that I've seen throughout all these images so far. Okay, let's check out Lolly here. This looks acceptably sharp. It's not wicked. As I said earlier, this lens is kind of a multi-use. It's very similar to the idea of the 60mm and f-mount. It is a macro lens, but it's also an exceptional everything else lens. That is the most versatile lens, in my opinion, that Nikon has ever made. I think they were trying to do that with this lens, and I do think they did a good job. I enjoyed using this lens, and I will continue to enjoy using this lens as kind of a catch-all, but at the same time, they didn't quite hit the nail on the head compared to the absolutely epic and legendary 60mm. We're definitely going to have to take some different shots to really get a true test of the tonal range. It seemed okay earlier. This is a little neutral, a little filmy. Of course, that's part of the, being at a higher ISO than I typically like to hang out at. My screen just shows too much. Again, here we are looking at like the saturation, which is just good. This is with nothing done to it. The greens look really good. The blues look really good. The reds look really good. The yellows look good. It's a very, very saturated lens, which is actually really great for like flower photography. So if you were going to take this out and do some macro of some flowers, you can rest assured that the colors are going to be fantastic. Let's add a little vignette. This has more noticeable vignette than most other lenses. I also want to take this image maybe real quick before we close out, and I want to check the profile correction here. It's very, very, very little, which is, kind of typical of 50mm. They just don't ever have that much distortion. So far, in conclusion, this lens is really nice to use. It's really fun. You are really kind of required to get like on the ground and get very close to your subject, which is very fun and involved. It feels good on the camera. It feels nice and balanced. The focus is moderately quick. We did have that one issue right here that has not come up again. It's basically 1 out of 24 that it had an issue with, and it was only in continuous autofocus. The answer to today's photo history trivia: the Nikon Nikkor, which was actually designed by a German engineer who was working for Nikon, and its intended purpose was for map making. So far, with all those positive things and one small negative thing, I do kind of believe that this lens may be a little bit overpriced, even at the $50 that I saved. This seems to me more like a $450 kind of lens based on its construction and based on its sharpness. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll subscribe, and if you do, I think you'll like these too. I'm Z Wade, the Z Wade, and Z Wade Photo, and I'll catch you in the next one.